A little while back, I took delivery of the QX1 sequencer from Yamaha, that's from 1984. Unfortunately, the 5¼ inch floppy drive on that was defect, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't make it to work. So I took the plunge and ordered a floppy emulator for the QX1, and today we're gonna install it. So this 5¼ inch drive has to go. I didn't bother looking for a replacement. I'll just swap it up for a floppy emulator this time on this machine. So flip it over, and we have some screws here that has to be taken out in usually Yamaha fashion. There's a lot of screws, but it's also very approachable this time. So off we go. This QX1 is pretty big, and it comes in at around 15 pounds of weight, 7.5 kilos. And so now we can just lift the top lid up, and it reveals everything basically. And you can see the drive to the right there, the ribbon cable and the power cable has to be removed to get this out. And I also have some screws to unscrew here as well. And before we do that, let's have a look at some of the electronics inside. And for a device not making any sounds, there's a lot of electronics going on. Lots of chips and stuff like that. And here's the drive itself. Some of the power supply, I should probably look into that as well. I couldn't see any bulging capacitors, but I'll check this out later. At this point, I didn't know if I had to remove that ribbon cable on the motherboard itself. I haven't done this before on the QX1, so I yanked it out. In hindsight, that was probably not necessary, but anyways. And I'm removing the 4 screws holding that grid over the floppy drive. And this is definitely not needed to remove the drive itself. But I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at some of the details on the floppy drive itself, the manufacturer, etc. For those interested in stuff like that. So I removed the grid so you can get a closer look at the drive itself. And now we can get to the screws that's holding the drive itself attached to the unit. And these aluminum brackets that I'm removing has to be fitted onto the floppy emulator later to hold that in place inside the QX1. So these has to be removed completely from the floppy drive. And then we have to flip the thing over again. This I probably could have done from the start, but I have to remove those 3 screws in the middle there to detach the floppy drive completely from the unit itself. So now the drive itself is completely detached from the unit, and all I have to do is yank out that ribbon cable. And by the way, that Molex power cable plug was incredibly hard to get out. I've cheated a little bit here and sped up, cut out some of my troubles yanking that out. But anyways, here's the drive. And it's actually a Canon drive, it seems. So there's only a few steps left now before we can replace that with the floppy emulator. The brackets I told you about earlier, the aluminum brackets, I have to unscrew those because I have to fit those on the floppy emulator itself. As I've done here, as you can see, that's the one side of the floppy emulator casing. And by the way, I got my floppy emulator from CP Magnetic Media. I'll leave a link for you in the description. And this has been made specifically for the QX1, so it comes with the right cables, the casing, and a USB memory stick with blank floppy images on it. The QX1 constantly reads and writes from a floppy while you use it, so when you initialize a QX1 for the first time, you have to format and ID set a blank floppy for the QX1 to use for that project. I'll get back to that in a future video. In a few days, by the way. So now it's a matter of attaching the floppy drive to the unit itself, which I'm doing now. So I'll attach that provided ribbon cable from CP Magnetic Media to the main motherboard and hook up the power. And let's close the lid and see if it fits. A nice and snug fit. That's perfect, actually. Just perfect. It's almost the same black as well. Very happy with the result of this cosmetically. But does it work? Let's see. Let's fire up the QX1. And it does. Ready to go, actually. With this floppy emulator and that OLED screen, I couldn't resist naming that first floppy image. I'm the 80s Espen Kraft. I hope you can appreciate this little humor. If all goes well, you'll be watching this video for the first time on a Tuesday if you see it right away. And just a couple of days later, this Friday to come, I will release the second part of this video where I show you how to actually work the QX1 sequencer. And that's no small thing, by the way. So look forward to that. And all that's left now is to just reattach that bottom plate. So the bottom plate goes back, reattached with the leftover screws, and we're ready to go. So thank you very much for watching. The next video will be released in a couple of days. I'm Espen Kraft, and I'll see you then. Cheers!